In the quiet suburban town of Greenwood, life moved at a comfortable pace. The residents enjoyed their tranquil routines, marked by friendly neighbourly chats and weekend barbecues. The town was a sanctuary of sorts, a place where the troubles of the world seemed far away. Among the residents was Jack Thompson, a 30-something software engineer known for his easygoing nature and sharp mind. Jack's life was one of contentment, a stable job, good friends, and a small but well-kept home on Maple Street. One sunny afternoon, Jack decided to spend some time in his garden, a hobby that brought him a sense of peace. The flowers were in full bloom, and the hedges, though overgrown, whispered with the promise of order and beauty. As he reached under a bush to pull out some stubborn weeds, a sharp sting pierced his hand. Startled, he yanked it back, catching a glimpse of a small, peculiar creature as it skittered away into the undergrowth. It was unlike anything he had seen before: spindly legs, a dark, shiny exoskeleton that gleamed ominously in the sunlight. The bite itself was barely noticeable, a tiny puncture wound that seemed insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Jack dismissed it with a shrug and returned to his gardening, the incident quickly forgotten. In the days that followed, the bite mark faded, and with it so did Jack's memory of the creature. But other changes, more insidious, began to creep into his life. At first they were subtle. He found himself feeling more tired than usual, despite a full night's sleep. His appetite waned, and he began to lose weight, his once hearty meals now leaving him disinterested. His friends noticed the change in him, but they attributed it to stress or perhaps a mild illness, nothing serious. After all, everyone had their off days. But Jack knew something was wrong. His thoughts, once sharp and organized, became muddled, as if a fog had settled over his mind. He struggled to concentrate at work, his focus slipping away like sand through his fingers. He found himself drifting off into strange daydreams, his mind wandering to dark, unfamiliar places. He tried to shake it off, attributing it to overwork, but the symptoms persisted, growing worse with each passing day. Weeks turned into months, and Jack's condition deteriorated. The fatigue deepened, seeping into his bones, leaving him exhausted and hollow. He began experiencing severe headaches, sharp and piercing, as if something were trying to burrow its way out of his skull. And then there were the sensations, an unsettling feeling of something crawling just beneath his skin, moving in a way that made his flesh crawl with revulsion. At night he would wake drenched in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The bite on his hand, which had long since healed, now itched fiercely, a burning reminder of the incident in the garden. Jack's friends grew concerned as they witnessed the alarming changes in him. The once sociable and cheerful man they knew had become withdrawn and irritable, his temper flaring over the smallest of things. His bright eyes, once full of life, now held a distant, haunted look, as though he were staring at something only he could see. His behavior grew increasingly erratic. He would forget entire conversations, make impulsive decisions, and exhibit bursts of uncharacteristic anger that left those around him shaken and confused. Jack himself began to question his sanity. The line between his own thoughts and those of something else, something foreign, began to blur. He sensed an alien presence in his mind, whispering dark thoughts and desires, pulling at the edges of his consciousness. Desperate for answers, he spent hours researching his symptoms online, delving into obscure medical journals and strange folklore. He stumbled upon stories of parasites and mind control, of creatures that could invade a host and bend them to their will. The idea seemed absurd, the stuff of nightmares, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was inside him, manipulating his actions and desires. One night, as the rain lashed against his windows and the wind howled through the trees, Jack found himself staring at his reflection in the mirror. His eyes, wide with terror, bore into his own. But it wasn't his face he saw staring back. There was something else there, something lurking just behind his pupils, a shadowy figure, a dark, malevolent force watching him. His hands trembled as he reached up to touch the glass, as if by some chance he might touch whatever was hiding behind his own gaze. The fear that gripped him was all-consuming, but deeper still was the realization that he was no longer alone in his own mind. The parasite, if that's what it was, had taken root, and its influence was growing stronger with each passing day. As the parasite's grip tightened, Jack's personality continued to unravel. The anger and paranoia that had been simmering beneath the surface now boiled over. He started isolating himself from friends and family, convinced they were plotting against him. His once tidy home became a chaotic mess, reflecting the turmoil within his mind. The walls seemed to close in on him, the air thick with the scent of decay and fear. Jack's health deteriorated further. He experienced blackouts, waking up in strange places with no memory of how he had gotten there. During these episodes, he would find strange symbols and drawings scattered around his house, scribbled in his own handwriting, but entirely unfamiliar to him. The symbols were dark, twisted, and ominous, as if pulled from the depths of some ancient nightmare. One particularly dark and stormy night, Jack felt an overwhelming compulsion to venture into the woods behind his house. The storm raged, the wind tearing at the trees, but Jack moved as if in a trance, driven by an unseen force. The rain soaked him to the bone, but he barely noticed, his eyes fixed on some invisible point ahead. He reached a clearing deep in the forest and collapsed to his knees, overcome by pain and confusion. The parasite within him stirred, its presence no longer a whisper but a scream, flooding his mind with foreign thoughts and memories, a cacophony of voices that drowned out his own. Jack's friends, concerned by his disappearance, organized a search party. They scoured the woods, calling his name, their voices barely audible over the howling wind. They found him in the clearing, standing unnaturally still, his eyes glazed and unresponsive. As they approached, Jack turned to face them. But it was no longer Jack. The parasite had fully integrated with his body, taking over his mind and actions. His friends recoiled in horror as they saw the emptiness in his eyes, the malevolent intelligence that had replaced their friend. Jack, or what remained of him, let out a guttural growl and fled into the darkness, disappearing into the forest. The search party returned to town, shaken and haunted by what they had witnessed. They could not comprehend the transformation they had seen, nor the malevolent force that had taken their friend. Jack was presumed dead, lost to the wilderness and the strange affliction that had claimed him. Life in Greenwood slowly returned to normal, but a shadow lingered over the town. The residents spoke in hushed tones about the events of that night, and the forest took on an air of foreboding. People avoided the woods, especially at night, fearing what might be lurking within. Deep in the heart of the forest, Jack, now a vessel for the parasite, lurked in the shadows, watching and waiting. The creature within him had bided its time, growing stronger and more cunning. It had plans, and it knew that the people of Greenwood were oblivious to the true nature of the threat that awaited them. The parasite had tasted the thrill of human life and control, and it was not content to hide forever. It would wait for the right moment to emerge from the shadows, to feed again and spread its influence. Jack's body was merely the beginning, a vessel for a greater, more terrifying purpose. And so, in the quiet town of Greenwood, the legend of Jack Thompson grew, a chilling tale of transformation and terror. The townspeople remained unaware that the true horror was still out there, hidden in the depths of the forest, waiting for the opportunity to strike again. The parasite, patient and relentless, would continue to haunt the town, a silent predator biding its time in the darkness.